The morning the driveway was blocked, everything changed. Ethan stood at his window, staring in disbelief at the thick orange barriers stretched across his own property, placed there overnight without warning. A printed notice flapped against the cones, stamped with the HOA seal and signed by its president, Linda Crow. It claimed Ethan was violating community alignment rules and access was suspended immediately. The promise felt cruelly clear. This neighborhood would soon learn a truth no one expected: Ethan had bought the house for peace. The long driveway curved gently toward his garage, fully inside his land records, verified and paid for years ago. Still, the HOA had always treated him like a problem. Linda's letters arrived monthly, polite on the surface but sharp underneath, reminding him that harmony required obedience. This time, she had gone further, blocking his only way out before sunrise. He called the HOA office and got silence. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as he tried to move the barriers and found them chained. The humiliation burned quietly. Linda was sending a message, and everyone saw it. Ethan knew reacting emotionally would only give her what she wanted. Instead, he stepped back, took photos, and made a calm decision that would shift the balance. As the sun climbed higher, Ethan smiled faintly, because Linda had made one mistake she would regret deeply. She believed power only flowed one way in this neighborhood. She had no idea what he was about to do next, or how quickly her confidence would collapse once the rules were read through. Now, by noon, the neighborhood buzzed with quiet speculation. Ethan didn't argue, complain, or post online like others had before. Instead, he sat at his kitchen table with a folder he hadn't opened in years. Inside were stamped surveys, county permits, and a land access agreement signed long before the HOA even existed. Every page told the same story, and none of them favored Linda, while others whispered. Ethan made calls. Not angry ones. Careful ones. He contacted the county records office, then a local zoning inspector, calmly explaining that a private driveway had been obstructed by a third party. He used exact words, the kind that trigger process, not drama. The inspector asked for photos. Ethan sent them within minutes. Across the street, Linda stood with two board members, pretending confidence as she explained that Ethan was non-compliant. She smiled tightly, certain her authority would scare him into backing down like the others had. What she didn't know was that her move had crossed from petty enforcement into something much more serious. An hour later, a white county vehicle turned into the cul-de-sac. Curtains shifted again. Linda's smile faltered as the inspector stepped out, clipboard in hand, eyes fixed on the chain barriers. He didn't look at Ethan first. He looked at the ground, the survey markers, the curve of the driveway itself. Ethan watched from his porch. Silent and composed. This wasn't about revenge. It was about letting truth do the work. The inspector began asking questions Linda wasn't prepared to answer, and for the first time, her voice lost its steady edge. She laughed nervously, insisting this was an internal matter. The inspector shook his head and said one sentence that made the air feel heavy. "Ma'am, this may not be an HOA issue at all." Linda's confidence cracked the moment those words landed. She tried to regain control, insisting the HOA had jurisdiction over all shared access points, but the inspector calmly pointed to the metal survey pin embedded near the driveway edge. He explained, slowly and clearly, that the pin marked private land, not communal space. Several neighbors leaned closer, realizing this was not going as expected. Ethan finally stepped forward, holding his folder. He didn't interrupt or accuse. He simply offered documents when asked. The inspector reviewed each page with growing interest, nodding as dates and signatures lined up perfectly. The driveway existed years before the HOA charter. Blocking it wasn't enforcement. It was obstruction. Linda's voice tightened as she argued technicalities, but each sentence made things worse. The inspector noted everything, including the chains, the notice, and the lack of emergency access. He explained that if Ethan had needed medical help, the consequences could have been severe. Silence spread through the street. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now watched Linda instead. Her authority depended on appearing right, and that image was slipping away fast. The inspector issued a temporary order to remove the barriers immediately. Linda hesitated, then nodded stiffly, signaling a board member to unlock the chains. As the driveway cleared, Ethan felt no triumph. Only calm. This wasn't over yet. He sensed Linda wouldn't accept this quietly. As the county vehicle pulled away, the inspector turned to Ethan and said he'd be filing a full report. Linda overheard that part, and the color drained from her face. That evening, Ethan received an email notification. It wasn't from the HOA. It was from the county. The subject line alone told him the balance of power was about to change completely. The county notice spread faster than gossip. By morning, neighbors were whispering openly, sharing screenshots and speculating about consequences. The report classified the blockage as an unauthorized action by the HOA, opening the door to fines and legal review. For the first time, the board's authority felt fragile. Linda called an emergency HOA meeting that night. Her message sounded urgent but controlled, asking residents to attend for clarification. Ethan went quietly, sitting in the back as Linda spoke about misunderstandings and cooperation. Her tone suggested unity, but her eyes kept drifting toward him. When the floor opened for questions, Ethan stood. He spoke slowly, explaining that he had tried resolving things privately many times. He mentioned letters, ignored calls, and now a blocked driveway. He never raised his voice. The room stayed silent because everyone recognized the truth in his restraint. Linda interrupted, accusing him of undermining community order. Ethan simply handed copies of the county notice to the board members. One by one, they read, their expressions changing. The document warned that further interference could result in personal liability, not just HOA penalties. That word landed hard. Personal. Linda's posture stiffened. She tried to move on, but the mood had shifted. Neighbors began questioning past fines and threats. The meeting spiraled into something Linda could no longer control. As people filed out, Ethan felt a quiet weight lift. He hadn't planned to expose anyone. He had only protected himself. Still, he sensed the final twist hadn't happened yet. Linda wasn't done, and when she made her next move, it would reveal more than she ever intended. 2 days later, Linda made her mistake. She sent out a mass email attempting to justify the driveway action, attaching internal HOA notes that were never meant to be shared. In trying to defend herself, she exposed months of targeted discussion about Ethan, calling him a problem resident and suggesting pressure tactics. The email reached everyone, including the county inspector. Within hours, a follow-up notice arrived stating that the HOA's actions would be formally reviewed. The tone was no longer neutral. It was investigative. Neighbors stopped Ethan to apologize. Some admitted they had been afraid to speak up before. Others shared their own stories, fines and warnings that now seemed questionable. What started as one blocked driveway was turning into a reckoning. Linda went quiet. No posts. No emails. The next HOA meeting was canceled without explanation. Then, a final update arrived. The board announced Linda's resignation, effective immediately, citing personal reasons. Few believed that phrasing. Ethan stood on his driveway that evening, watching cars pass freely. He hadn't sought control or revenge. He had only insisted on fairness, and fairness had answered back. The neighborhood felt different now, lighter somehow, like a long tension had broken, yet one question remained. What would replace Linda's rule? As the sun dipped low, Ethan realized this story wasn't just about one driveway. It was about what happens when quiet resistance meets unchecked authority, and how quickly power shifts when truth is finally allowed to stand. The weeks that followed felt strangely calm, but beneath the surface, everything had changed. A temporary HOA committee took over, promising transparency and fairness. For the first time, notices were polite, meetings were open, and questions were actually answered. Neighbors who once avoided involvement now showed up, curious and cautious. Ethan watched it all quietly, aware that real change is always fragile at the beginning. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the county addressed directly to Ethan. It explained that the investigation had expanded beyond the driveway incident. Emails, meeting notes, and enforcement records were being reviewed. Patterns were emerging. Selective enforcement. Pressure tactics. Actions that blurred the line between authority and personal control. Ethan felt a mix of relief and sadness. He had never wanted the neighborhood torn apart, only treated fairly. A few days later, a former board member knocked on his door. She looked nervous but determined. She admitted Linda had pushed decisions through aggressively, often warning that anyone who disagreed would become the next target. The board had gone along out of fear. Speaking now felt like a chance at redemption. As the sun set, Ethan realized the true impact of what had happened. It wasn't just about rules anymore. It was about courage spreading quietly from one person to another. The driveway had been reopened. But something else had opened too. Voices that had been silent were finally being heard, and that kind of change never stays small for long. The final update came on a calm morning. The county concluded its review, issuing formal warnings and mandating oversight training for the HOA. New bylaws were required. Clear limits were set. Power was no longer unchecked. The neighborhood received the notice together, and for once, no one felt afraid reading it. Ethan stood outside as neighbors gathered, talking openly, some even laughing. A place once ruled by tension now felt human again. Someone thanked him for standing up when others couldn't. He replied gently that he had only stood still while the truth moved forward. That seemed to resonate more than anger ever could. The driveway remained just a driveway, ordinary and unremarkable. Yet it had become a symbol. Not of rebellion, but of balance. Authority could exist, but only with accountability. Rules could matter, but only when applied with fairness. As evening settled in, Ethan drove down the open path, the road smooth and quiet beneath his tires. The promise made at the beginning had been fulfilled. The shocking twist wasn't revenge or destruction. It was restraint, patience, and letting the system work when pushed by honesty, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you loved the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.